I know you've been getting a lot of updates, but we obviously just completed our first meeting in person, our annual meeting in 3 years. So it was good to have everyone back in the room. We covered a lot of ground over the last 3 days, and I think it was really productive for us. Basically, on Sunday, Monday, we spent an awful lot of time in committee meetings, also making sure that we thanked our clubs for the extraordinary work during the pandemic. It could not have happened if we all didn't come together. That was clubs, league, our medical advisors, the players, the NFLPA. I think we obviously are very grateful to the work that happened over the last couple of years. Our CBA and media extensions obviously have provided us with a lot of stability, a lot of opportunity for us to really take that and use that opportunity to take on new challenges and opportunities, which we spend a lot of time talking about also. Obviously, the state of the game, we all feel that we completed maybe one of our best seasons in the history of the NFL, and how we continue that was a focus. Also, as you can well imagine from my standpoint, this is no time to get complacent. We have a lot of work to still do and a lot to accomplish. So a lot of work on continuing to keep moving, particularly as we're going through a changing business and social and media landscape. This is something that we obviously have to work our way through and continue to make progress in all those areas. We spent extraordinary amount of time, probably the most time, on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We spoke each of the 3 days on that and spent an awful lot of time on that in different forums. We also had, obviously, a report from our DEI committee and took some initial steps. We have more steps to take, which we'll be working on over the next several months and probably years. We spent an awful lot of time on our health and safety today, immediately after the competition committee, continuing to make progress there and adopting a few policy changes. I think we had 11 business matters that we voted on, and then the competition committee. I know you've been updated on the overtime rule. So I think that's the highlights, so happy to take your questions.
Okay, we're going to begin with Jason Reed, ESPN.
Hey, Roger.
Hey, Jason.
The mandatory offensive assistant is a major change under the Rooney Rule. Is it your hope that maybe 4 or 5 or 6 years that rule change will result in an appreciable difference in the pipeline of coaches on offense to, hopefully impact hiring moving forward?
Yeah, Jason, I'm not sure I would connect it necessarily to the Rooney Rule. I think, our focus and our work over the last several years on this, which has been very important to us, it's looked at the Rooney Rule, it's looked at policies, it's looked at programs. I don't think there's a single answer. I think, we have complex issues like society does, but we're gonna look for every opportunity to make progress here. I think the offensive assistance is a recognition of the fact that we don't have the number of offensive coordinators that are people of color, and we think that's where most of the head coaches, and at least the recent years, have been a trend on the offensive side of the ball, and this gives us an opportunity to develop some people in that area. But there was a really open dialogue with clubs, with our owners, with some outside people, to really look and say, what can we do to try to help solve some of these issues? And, as you know, we've also hired a number of outside people who I think are going to be advisors to us that will look at all our policies and procedures and make suggestions to it, including on the Rooney Rule.
Joe Adam, far right, Buffalo.
Hi, Commissioner. How are you?
Good.
Been talking about a new stadium in Buffalo for a long time. Your reaction now that an agreement has been reached, perhaps from a league perspective, as well as maybe a personal one, given your roots in Jamestown, and maybe a justification for $850 million in public money, which is a record.
Well, I would tell you this. One, I am happy to see a resolution to it. I think the Buffalo Bills mean a great deal to the community, and I know that community means a great deal to the NFL. And so I believe firmly that a stadium was necessary. I said sometime in the last year or so that a new stadium was really going to be required. The current stadium was ending or nearing the end of its useful life. We needed to have a new stadium to keep the Buffalo Bills there. There's no other place to play. So I think the credit I give, obviously, number one, probably to the governor for her leadership and stepping into a situation where she had to find a solution to it, or she took on that leadership role. And she worked with the county, she worked with others, she worked with the Bills, she worked with us. And I look at this as a public-private partnership. Obviously, there's public money in this, which is not uncommon in stadiums. There's the NFL money. The Bills are going to be putting money. There's a 30-year commitment to be there in that new stadium, which I think is the most important thing ultimately for the fans. These are things that are worked out and through negotiations from market to market, and I think it's a good resolution. And I'm thrilled that the Bills will be there for at least my lifetime.
Hi, Roger. Nikki Jabala with the Washington Post. When the league announced the findings of Beth Wilkinson's investigation into Washington's workplace last July, said Dan Snyder would focus on the stadium and other matters, and Tanya Snyder would take over daily operations and represent the club at league functions. Is that still the case? Are you able to provide any insight into what Dan Snyder's role is and status is with the team currently?
Yeah, Nikki, Dan Snyder has not been involved in day-to-day operations. Don't believe he's been at the facility at all. We continue to have league matters. Tanya's represented the team as the CEO, both on a day-to-day basis, but also here at the league. She represented the club here, and that will continue for at least the foreseeable future. Dan and I will talk about that at some point.
Roger, where does your investigation on Deshaun Watson stand, and how soon do you expect to have a decision?
Our people are working on it. Obviously, these are serious charges, so we're looking at this seriously. We now have, obviously, at least resolution from the criminal side of it. Obviously, there's still civil charges that are going on. So our investigators hopefully will have access to more information. And that will be helpful, obviously, in getting to the conclusion of what are the facts and was there a violation of the personal conduct policy. But that determination will be made by a joint a disciplinary officer that was established by the NFLPA and the NFL. And so she will make that decision when the facts are all in, and we'll see. There's no time frame on that.
Yes, Roger, just wondering, you've talked to some of the women involved in the civil suits. Will you talk to more of them, and will you also bring Deshaun to New York for an interview?
That's up to the investigators, Mary Kay. That's something that they will make the determination of when to do that and who to do that with. They are the ones that have met with some of the people that have information that we want to know. We will seek to speak to everybody who can give us a perspective and try to get to the bottom line and the facts.
Mark Maskey, far right.
Roger, separate from the investigation with Deshaun Watson, were you troubled at all by the pursuit of him leading up to the trade, and also the contract to which you assigned, either the magnitude or the structure of the contract?
Well, Mark, listen, we've been very clear with every club that whether the criminal matter it gets resolved or not, the personal conduct policy is something that's very important to us. And so the personal conduct policy does not need a criminal violation to be a violation of the personal conduct policy. So they recognize that that's something that we're going to pursue. We're going to make sure that we get to the bottom of the facts and make sure that how it applies to the personal conduct policy. That's where we are at this point. And when we get to that, a decision will be made on whether there should be any discipline, and if so, what is it?
Roger here, Adam.
I'm sorry.
Adam Beasley, Pro Football Network. I was wondering if you could provide an update on the Stephen Ross, Brian Flores investigation. Do you plan to meet individually with all involved, including Steve Ross? And do you think that this will wrap up before the beginning of the regular season?
Again, I'm not doing that investigation. Mary Jo White is doing that investigation, and she will have our full support and the support of the team. She will make the determinations on that, and there is no timetable for her to bring that report. When we have it, we will certainly move forward.
Okay, we're going to go Ryan from Denver.
Hey, Roger. Ryan O'Halloran of the Denver Post. You said at the Super Bowl the importance of the Broncos to consider diversity candidates for ownership. How do you plan on assisting that, achieve that goal, but also the job of the trustees to find the best price for the beneficiaries?
Well, they have a fiduciary responsibility to do that, but I believe that you can also do that in the context of diversity also. And I think our ownership feels that. And I believe the trustees feel that. So we believe we can achieve both objectives. We think diversity in our ownership group is important. I think the ownership made that clear in their statement yesterday. So we're encouraging any bidder to make sure they have a diverse group. Ultimately, it's their decision, but they know how we feel.
Jared Bell, USA Today. Roger, in the name of transparency, public confidence, what's the value of having a written report released publicly in relation to the Brian Flores lawsuit, and particularly the charges against Stephen Ross and the allegations pertaining to the Rooney Rule, potential violations? A written report released to the public.
Well, I guess I'd have to talk to our people about that in one context, which is this is a litigation issue. It's not an investigation, it's a litigation matter. So it'll be resolved in the context of litigation. That's not where I'm focused on it. Our attorneys obviously will be focused on that. I'm focused on what do we do to try to understand the issues that Brian's raised, that we all know, and the ones that he would obviously be able to raise for us, and try to see what we can do to address those issues.
Yeah, but the charges against Ross, not so much the legal matter. I mean, that's a question of NFL integrity, if you're talking about.
Yes, on matters of integrity of the game, if we see something that's a violation, we will certainly make that public, yes.
Hey, Roger. Josina Anderson, CBS Sports. I was just curious, how necessary do you think it is for owners to have more meaningful interactions with coaches who are people of color relative to the number of candidates that we saw actually get hired this cycle? And lastly, if you could also just comment on whether the volume of complaints should be a factor in how they, weigh how they potentially assess discipline on Deshaun Watson in comparison to his strong denial of wrongdoing.
Two different issues there. So let me. You just want to get everything in. I got it. Let me start with that one. Listen, I think we're going to let the facts tell us. We're going to look at every one of those complaints. If the complainants want to share that with us, we would welcome that. And so we will seek to find every fact we possibly can on that. On the first one, it was on we had a really good session and an open discussion with owners, head coaches, and general managers today, in a very open dialogue about diversity. That was the number one issue and the only issue that we discussed today in that context. And I think what you heard, what I heard in that context was, and all of us share, is that there does need to be more interaction so that not only the owners but the general managers have more understanding of the candidates, what they've been through, who they are, what's made them a great coach in the NFL, and to get to this level, and why they'd be great head coaches. And so I think we're going to establish some of that. I expect that work's going to happen, and probably as early as May, there will be a circumstance where that will take place.
Roger, Tom Pelissero, NFL
Hey, Tom.
Network.
Yep.
The overtime change was passed today with the modified proposal for only the postseason.
Mm-hmm.
Do you anticipate that we're going to see this eventually go into the regular season? And to what extent did the outcry from fans, media, everyone else about the Kansas City-Buffalo playoff game and how that ended impact the thinking in the room?
Tom, listen, we always listen to the fans. That's an important thing. You hear that on both sides, and I understand that. We're always looking to improve. And I think what really drove the decision was the database, ultimately, and looking at the facts and what's happened. Where we saw that most having an influence, I think it was 12 games in the postseason have been in overtime, 7 of which I believe were won on the first possession. When you see that, that's the type of thing that I think our coaches and everyone looked at. This is an issue in the postseason we should deal with. I think they like the overtime rule in the regular season. I don't necessarily believe that just because we're doing it in the postseason that'll lead to in the regular season though. And we'll always look at it. There may be a different solution. You know, the overtime rule's been through a lot of changes. I think it was 10 and 12 and now 22. So I think we'll continue to look at that and sharpen those rules as we do with every rule. One of the things I'm really proud of this league is we always look every year at our rules and try to make an evaluation of what's best for the game, what's best for the safety of the game, what's best for our players, and most of all, what's best for our fans. And I think that's paid dividends by the quality of our game.
Well, now we welcome in our senior NFL insider, Josina Anderson, there in sunny Palm Beach, Florida, from the NFL owner meeting. We're going to get to that OT adjustment and more of what Roger Goodell said, but we did see him there at the podium. Josina, what were a few of the takeaways of what Goodell talked about?
Well, first and foremost, I think you can see just from how Commissioner Roger Goodell addressed the media here at the owners' meetings in West Palm Beach is how passionate he is issues when it comes to the hiring practices of the league. And they talked about the discussions that have been happening here surrounding that. And first and foremost, some of the tweaks that they made with respect to not only the Rooney Rule still being on the means of reviewing those hiring practices, but just some of the modifications, right, that include now requiring the hiring of a minority offensive assistant, including a woman in all of those categories with respect to that as well, and something that's a little bit more of a minor tweak with kind of discluding the fact that you could have virtual interviews to satisfy some of those requirements as well. And I think just to add to that anecdotally, I talked to the commissioner about 30 minutes yesterday at the reception that they had in conjunction with the coaches and the media, and I really feel like I got to see firsthand how much these issues matter to him. I mean, he went also so far as to say that he doesn't even really want to leave his post as commissioner until he continues to see more substantive progress in this area. Now, we saw it with the number of hires as far as the front office in the National Football League. You're talking about guys like Ryan Poles, Kwesi and things like that. But Lovie Smith being the only African-American hire in this cycle, and obviously Mike McDaniels as a representative, as a person of color, not quite meeting the ratio with respect to all of the coaches that are out there. The other thing that I think is meaningful, and this was a question that followed up from our conversation that I had with him last night and even in the meeting, was how necessary he thinks it is for owners to have more meaningful interactions with the coaches, specifically coaches that represent people of color, just because they represent the gatekeepers ultimately to these decisions. And if there is a comfort barrier that needs to be broken down, how much more and in what ways can you achieve that so that you can see things that are actionable relative to increase in numbers of, people of color representing, the coaching hires at the end of these coaching cycles. So he did mention that a retreat or something like that could happen in May at the next owners meeting. That's what they're targeting. So I think that's the real next tangible change that you will see relative to how they're trying to effectuate, the things that I was just talking about.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.